Welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn with Terry, Francesca, and Jay talking about behavioral elements and its applications to the real world, personal, professional, and everything in between. And this month is no different. We are going to be talking about sales and purchasing behavior. So, whether you are a person, now here's the thing, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to tell you the reality. If you say, I'm not a salesperson, that is not true. You sell all the time. And we are going to demonstrate that today. And where we might feel uncomfortable in sales is really often because we have a perception about what sales is. But the reality, the elements will tell us something different. So we're going to dig into that today. I'm going to kick it over. Francesca, would you give us just a quick breakdown of the elements for anybody that's joining us that maybe hasn't taken the assessment, and just a quick refresher for anybody who has taken the assessment? Go for it.
Absolutely. First off, I just want to say it's so great to be here with all of you. I always see the chat lighting up, and I feel so grateful that both Terry, myself, and Jay have the opportunity to be here with you guys to learn and all of that. If you are new, like Jay said, we're diving into the elements. So if you haven't already taken the assessment, Jay or Terry is going to link it into the chat for you, and that way you're able to very quickly access it. And if it's been a while since you have taken it, feel free to do so. Um, I just want to say in terms of one of the things I'm appreciative of the elements is the adaptability that it brings to us and that reminder. So when you are supposed to be stationed, but there's an accident on a bridge and you can't move and you're in a vehicle, you just adapt and here you are. So the elements help you with various different things. That being one of them. So if you do see me turn my head, it's purely for my safety and making sure that this element chat stays nice and safe and happy and well. So, but it looks like the cops are here and this accident will be cleared and everything's all dandy. So in terms of the element, um, first and foremost, if you are a high drive to acquire, so my for example, I do have a high fire backed by water. Jay is high fire backed by air, and our wonderful Terry here is high air backed by water. One of the things for fire, we're going to be very direct. It's the drive to acquire, so very much results focused, win focused. They're going to be a little bit more on the choleric person, or sorry, behavior type. They want everything very direct and clear when you're communicating with them versus perhaps a water. They're going to be a bit more empathic, more on the connection base of things. And of course, their drive is to bond. So they want to connect and collaborate. That's their main drive. For someone with a high air, I mean, Terry can go into this, but the drive to learn. So very much about brainstorming and all about data learning and that just that high drive to learn and be that student of life. And of course, with a high water, that's going to be the drive to defend. So with that particular element, it's very much about sustainability, processes, systems, how they can have that long-term success. And they're exceptional. That element is, and we have, I think Sarah Austin is a high earth backed by, I believe, air maybe or fire.
Water.
Water, fantastic. So we got some really good earths in this group as well. We'll dive a little bit more into it. I know with our session today, we'll kind of pair how each of the element relates to, how we buy, how we purchase, sales, everything of that nature. So get to know a little bit about that. But the main synopsis is fire, earth, air, and water. So if you haven't taken the assessment, please do. It's well worth it. And I
Awesome.
apologize for the sirens. I will mute my camera.
All right. Well, you be safe and chime in when you can. All right. If you've taken the assessment, toss into the chat what your primary element is, so that way we can get an idea of this. And Terry, let's start with maybe a misconception. All right. Now, it's not so much a misconception because across our 40,000 plus data sets, we have done studies on sales. We've done it with Keller Williams. We've done it with a number of others that are really kind of focused on that sales industry. And we do see a higher level of fire leading the way in there because, well, it's the drive to acquire, it's the competitive, it's the results focused. We want to win, we want to attain and acquire different resources. So we do see a lot of fire show up in sales. But you're a really good salesperson, Terry, and you're not a fire. How is that possible? Can you tell us about this?
I don't know. That's a great question. Am I a really good salesperson? Let's pretend I am, and let's talk about the idea of why it works. As Francesca mentioned, my highest element is air, and it's up there pretty good. My water is up there pretty good. And so when I sell, it is for two reasons. One, because it's going to help the people I serve, and because it's going to be this creative outlet for me to be able to put new ideas, new opportunities, new connections in front of those same folks. I think my water is what really drives my sales ability, coupled with my communication skills that I believe came from the good folks at the World of Air.
I love that. This is where I think people get lost in the sauce, right? Sales is there's an art, there's a skill to it. It can be developed, we can learn it. But the reality is I really think most sales training goes the wrong way. What sales training ends up doing is like, here's the tactics. This is how you craft your opening. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. And I'm going to share with you just real quick an experience. I was brought in to work with an IT firm in Europe, and their CEO, super high fire. And actually, it was the only fire element in the entire organization. But I mean, this person was off the charts, higher than me. And that CEO had come in and was like, all right, listen, to his team. He's like, all right, listen, I want you on the phones, smiling and dialing. The more calls you get out, the more sales we're going to get. And I want you it doesn't matter if they say yes or no, just call, 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 get out there, do it. That quarter was their worst sales quarter of the history of the company. Like people were demoralized and they just took a step back. They didn't want to do any sales and it showed. So when they had brought us in, we actually did an assessment for the entirety of the organization, which unsurprisingly in the IT space, we saw a lot of water, earth, and air. And it was something that the CEO didn't necessarily understand the different behaviors. Every single one of those people were like, I don't like sales. Like, I don't like this smiling and dialing. I don't like the people telling me no, the rejection. I don't know how to ask for the final money. I think we need to cover some of these different things because more than likely, if you're in the audience and you're experiencing any of those, it might be because you've not been taught to your element towards sales. We shifted and started to look at exactly what you just said, Terry. And all of a sudden, the next quarter, they had record sales for their company because we taught them how to sell from their own element. So let's break down the air element. One of the things I heard you say was about kind of solving a problem. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, so air being the naturally curious element, if you start out a sales process the right way, you're not going in with a pitch, you're going in with curiosity. You're going in to ask a bunch of questions, to understand the situation, to understand the problems that the company is facing, because only when you can align their problems to the solution you offer can you actually sell somebody on something. Because otherwise, why do they need it unless it's a late night Amazon purchase, which we've already covered? So it's one of those things where that air piece, that curiosity, that ability to play Columbo, I know, old school reference from way back in the day, um, allows you to get a solid grounding of what's going on and how big of a problem is it. Turns out the bigger the problem they have, the more likely they are to want to fix it, which means the more likely you are to sell something. So the air comes in super handy in that regard because, in my experience, I've watched fiery salespeople come in, ask maybe a question or two, and then get into pitch mode, right? And just throw up all over their shoes and tell them why they need this. The world's changed. Our customers know almost as much as the people selling the product and service. And if they don't, it's only because they didn't take the time to research it. So we no longer can even sell. We can only help people make better buying decisions.
Yep. And ChatGPT makes it so much easier for us to, hey, give me 16 different, interpretations of what I need to solve this problem. And people are able to do that. And all of a sudden, they know what they want much more
That's
than
it.
I think they used to. I see Sam
That's it.
posted in the chat, spent many years in sales, was miserable. The one exception was Gateway Computers, where the role was solutions advisor and not sales rep. That perspective flip was amazing. Sarah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? And you, being somebody who's more of a water element, more of that sort of structured side of things, well, a solutions rep is helping people. And I really think that when we're talking about something like air and water being on the right side of the behavioral elements wheel, it's collaborative. It's much more engaging. Thank you, it's much more engaging. It's much more, hey, connected to the people that they're selling to, not the products that they're necessarily selling. And I think that lines up really well with what you just said about air. So let me ask this. When we're thinking about that sort of curiosity, what are some of the questions that we should be bringing into? And this is not just true for air elements, because I want to remind everybody, just because you're high in an element doesn't mean that you're good at it. Just because you're low in an element doesn't mean that you're bad at it. So we can adopt the best practices from all of the elements, but we can really lean into the patterns that we may be naturally. So you as a natural air, Terry, what are some of those questions that maybe you start off with that would be helpful in navigating some of these sales conversations?
It's interesting because I don't necessarily ever go in with a playbook, much like as you've noticed over the last year and a half, I don't ever really plan for
No.
these meetings, right? I know it's so crazy. But the questions I get to usually start with what's going on, what's the challenge, why are we here today? One of my favorites is if you could wave the magic wand and make this challenge go away, what would that look like? My goal is to identify where they are now, where they want to be in their ideal state, and then come up with a plan that's going to actually move them from current to ideal in as short and efficient time and as effective time as possible.
I love
So looking at those things that way, and the benefit of being a good communicator is you trust that your listening skills are going to allow you to ask the next right question.
it. So powerful. Francesca, any thoughts that you want to share on that?
Yeah, in terms of like sales and
And the
uh
air. Yep.
in the air element. Okay. I mean, I have something to pull from my personal experience. I would say Terry hit the nail on the head for air. How about you, Jay? What are your thoughts? What
I
would
had
you?
to learn this. As a fire, as a very, very high fire, I was probably, I would say my early sales career was more towards the pitch and, pitch and persuade as opposed to understand and, empathize. And when I started asking questions and really getting a better understanding of the pain points, I think that that really is what elevated so much. So I had to actually take a step back from my fire element because I don't mind rejection. I don't mind trying. I don't mind pushing. I don't mind any of those types of things. And I was never like a hard salesperson. I wasn't the person that was just like, are you going to buy or not? That wasn't really my style. It was much more about just really getting people excited about what I was excited about, which is usually what I was selling. Um, but when I flipped the script and started asking questions, that's really where it came into be.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Really good.
So let's shift gears and let's talk about the water element. Now, this is the element that I most often hear say, I'm not a salesperson. I don't sell. I don't do sales. Okay. And I think it's funny that they try to sell you on the fact that they're not salespeople. But with that being said, let's tap into the concepts of relationship based sales. I see you, Cheryl. No stress. We're going to navigate that. What are your thoughts? And again, I'm asking the more high waters on the group to chime in here first. What are your thoughts on this?
Are we waiting for the chat or should Terry and I chime in?
Jump in.
Okay. Let's see what Taylor says. Sales not always equal money. Okay. Very good, very good. Terry, do you want to share a bit from your experience? And then I'm happy to share mine. I do have a funny story to tell.
I love that. I can't wait to hear it. 17 years ago, I started saying the phrase, all business is relationship business. We've heard for years that people do business with people they know, like, and trust. Listen, if people can't get to know you, they certainly aren't going to like you. And it's really hard to have someone trust you if they don't like you. So your ability to build relationships and do it in a manner that isn't transactional or completely self-serving, I think is one key to success in sales. Let's hear your story, Francesca.
I love that, Terry. And as you were saying that, I noticed that Caitlin said, and thank you, Caitlin. Caitlin's high water. She says, I feel like as a water, we are more focused on making sure that the product is right for them, and the relationship is what they focus on, right? So we know that we will make the money as long as we take care of the people. And I want to note on that. So that's kind of where my story stems from, a little bit like what Terry was sharing. When I was like 16, 17 years old, I had graduated high school early. I was going to go off to university. My dad got sick with cancer, and I ended up getting a job offer for something that I never thought I would do, and it was for sales at this particular counter. I ended up being an exec for the company, but when I was a sales for the counter, I didn't really know what I was doing per se. I didn't know what my element was. I didn't know I was even like good at any of this stuff. I just was like, oh, okay, I'll just, be kind and, see what these customers need or what these clients need. And this one day, this wonderful gentleman, one of the high execs came and he says, he's like, I'm going to do a store visit to see how you're doing, how your numbers are, whatever. And I'll never forget Corey Waters. He goes, how's your DBR, Francesca? I'm like, I'm so sorry. What's that? He's like, your daily business record. I'm like, oh, I don't have a daily business record. He goes, okay. Do you know where your targets are to date, right? Are your targets versus your sales, like actual to date and versus last year? I said, oh, no. Should I be tracking that? He's like, yeah. He's like, you've been at the counter for like 8 months now. I was like, okay. So then he's like, and how about this? Like, what's your projection for next month? I'm like, I had no answer for any of this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be fired. So I look at him and I'm like, Corey, I'm so sorry. Like, I have to take ownership on this. Like, this is on me. And why are you asking all these questions? He's like, well, first off, Francesca, he's like, we haven't seen sales this high on this counter in the last like 6 years. He's like, we just want to know what you're doing. And I was like, oh, I'm like, well, all I was doing was every single person that came to that counter, it wasn't about what I could sell them. It was making them feel special, making them feel seen. Like, exactly what Caitlin said. Is the product right for them? There'd be times where I'm like, you know what? I know that if you go to that store, you can get this exact same product for like $6. It'll do just fine. It'll save you the money for these two other high-end products that'll really get the most bang for your buck. And my clients respected me for that. And as time went on, I went to maybe have tea with elderly people, invited them to my skating competitions. And as that relationship built, of course, my counter grew. And one of the tools that they had there was this 222 method. 2 days after someone came to your counter, you call them and you don't say anything, but I just want to say, so Cheryl, thank you so much for coming to the counter yesterday. It was a pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to see you again. I hope you have a wonderful day. That's it. 2 weeks later, all I do is you check in, you call. Cheryl, I just want to do a little check-in. How are your products doing? How are you doing? And how's your grandson's competition or whatever? And we chat about that. And then 2 months later, that's when you do the other follow-up to say, Cheryl, it's been 2 months. I want to make sure those products are working for you. Is there anything that I can do to support you? Do you want to come back in for a check-in? And I know that you're about maybe 6 weeks or 4 weeks away from them running out. If there's anything I can put aside for you for next time, you just let me know. That's literally all I did. But this is what propelled those sales. But I think the thing is, and why I said to Corey that day is, I'm like, I haven't been focused on what my numbers are. I just want people to know that they're taken care of and that I appreciate and value them. I don't want them to think they're a dollar sign. And I think it just goes back to what Terry and Jay were saying, is that when we're able to take away the pitch, no matter what our element is, I do realize now, all these years later, I am quite a high flyer backed by water, but that's not what drives it. It kind of comes into play of how can I make this person feel seen and loved and just appreciated. And I think like what Terry was saying, when we're talking to people, whether it's on the phone, a client, or a long-term relationship that we're wanting to build and have a sustainable, like, Jay has certain Fortune 500 companies he's been working with for years. The reason why they keep going back to him is that they don't look like a dollar sign in his eyes. Yes, he gets the sales from them, but first and foremost, he's making sure, how can I actually value you? And if I can't value you, how can I support you in a different way? right? So that would be my story with that. And it's always something that I've, Corey and I still laugh about till this day of me not having my DBR, but it's just a testament to care about people and if you take care of people, and you take care of the work will take care of you.
I think
So
that definitely landed for Caitlin, who said, "Oh my God, I remember this, and we'll be adopting that." I want to comment on Cheryl's comment in the chat too. When my kids in elementary school sold stuff, I bought everything to keep from having to go to door with them. Cheryl, that's all right. That's a kindness. So, and I love Taylor's comment. I sell evidence-based practice programs to people who didn't know they even needed it and they don't purchase it. We offer it because we already purchased. They still need to come buy in, wanting us to put that on the program. I think this is really aligned, and I think it's such an important lesson. And here's kind of the takeaway is if you're a water element and feel like you're not a salesperson, guess what? You are natural in the space that all of the other elements have to do to be successful salespeople. It's not my natural inclination, but I recognize that if I don't create a connection, if I don't build empathy, if I don't have the relationship, or as Terry calls it, the relatability to the person that I'm trying to sell, I'm not going to sell. Salespeople look for specific things. High flyers, they're going to look and see if you got golf clubs in the back of your car and be like, oh, you're a golfer. What do you think about this? And that is not necessarily a natural thing, but it is for a water element. So you are already equipped with the most important tool. It's now just being able to navigate that second part of it. And I think that Francesca, your story and that tactic is such a powerful one. I think, for me, when I was thinking about when I look at sales, this is something that I think is a little shocking. Those with higher water, they may not necessarily be the fastest to sales, and they may not necessarily have the highest quantity of sales. However, the lifetime customer value from a water-based sales approach, as opposed to a fire-based sales approach, the water-based sales approach crushes it every single time. Because just like what Francesca said, people keep coming back. They refer, they say, oh, you've got to go see my friend Francesca at the counter. She's going to take great care of you. Whereas if you don't have that relational aspect in the sales process, ultimately what you're doing is churn and burn. And, even if your product's great, even if whatever, if they don't trust you, they're not going to do business with you. If they don't like you, they'll make it their business to disrupt you. So I think it's so important. Let's talk about our old friend, the earth. Okay, so earth and sales. I've actually met quite a few earths that love sales. And I've also met the other half that go, I couldn't be bothered with sales. And I find this an interesting element to kind of explore in the space of sales. What are your thoughts? One of the things that I think could be really interesting is what is it that creates the conditions for an earth to love sales versus not so much love sales? What do you think?
I think it's adorable that you said you met the other half of Earth people that don't like sales, like it's a 50-50 split.
It feels like it's a 50-50 split.
Does it? It's not like an 80-20 split. I think if and when Earth people are super passionate about and aligned to the product or service they're representing, and they build out a process or a system that is scalable and repeatable and something that they can get into the flow of and stay in the flow of, I think that they will excel exceptionally well, especially when selling to other Earth type folks, which a lot of times CFOs or other folks that can control the purse strings have a lot of Earth tendencies.
Mhm. So we do have at least one Earth in the crowd. Love for you to weigh in. Do you love or not so much love the sales process?
And you're
If
not
you
allowed
do
to
have
say you're 50-50 on it. We can't have that right now.
if you do have Earth in your secondary, weigh in as well. Love to see what you have to say. I think you really captured something. For the ones that I have experienced that do love sales, usually it's they love the process and they have a system in place where it's just like first I do this, then I do this, and it's clear and it's been reliably shown. What I have seen though, and this is where one of the people I was actually coaching, exceptionally good in the sales world, um, exceptionally good in the sales world until COVID. When COVID hit and everything shifted, and I'm not going to out her, but it's one of my family members. When COVID hit, and before she was visiting all the doctor's offices, visiting all the healthcare systems, going in, she had a system that was in place. COVID disrupted the system, and all of a sudden sales tanked. And it required a complete change. And that was a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And so when there's no system, that can be the conditions of, that's not so great. If it's just freewheeling, like an air might be really comfortable with, or a fire might be comfortable with, not such a great environment of sales, at least in my experience. Francesca, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting because just as a little tidbit for all of you. So for any of us certified behavioral guides, we have a session every Thursday where we dive into different topics and how we can, best kind of navigate some of these things so we can bring more value to you. And one of the things that I had got in the group to do was like a role playing exercise, which sounds really cheesy, but we had a lot of fun with it. And what was interesting is that we observed that a lot of we were pretty much doing the extremity of each element. There was no balance in it, which was the point. But a lot of the high fire and the high water, and I had delegated these roles to people who were like, I gave Terry high earth, which he clearly is like the lowest in earth, and Jay was like high water, and so on and so forth. But what's interesting, and someone like Natalie, I don't know if you're in the audience today, Natalie, who's very high water, I got her to be a high fire. And what's interesting is that there was a lot of common ground and a lot of just shared understanding between where the high fire and the high waters, where the high fire and the high earth's perspectives were coming from. And what's interesting is that even though there's such a contrast and a dissonance between, oh, we're on the structure, the unstructured, and there's a lot of similarities there that I think we don't give enough credit to. Because if you even look at Jay's EA, who's a very high earth and high fire, my EA, who I've worked with for 3 years, she's now working with me again, high earth, high fire. I look at someone like Julie, who is exceptional about processes. She's got that flame underneath her, but the way that she's able to navigate that is like nothing I've ever seen before. Same with my executive assistant with very, very high earth. Lynette has been able to achieve multiple different real estate agents, including myself when I was in my field, to do exceptional sales because her processes are just, they're like no other. And when you're able to follow those, and if she like when she helps other people do that, it's incredible. So I've seen her now. I think she just merged three massive real estate companies into one just because of her systems, and now she's going to be putting that into mine. But what's really neat is that we would think, oh, they're too rigid, there's no way. But no, she that's her strength. So I would argue that, like, I don't know, I think Earths could be exceptional at sales. I just think that maybe it's more of a comfortability thing. It's not that they don't have the skill set to do it. It just might be that maybe it's not their comfort zone. It may not be their passion. But I think that, I don't know, I think that they're very talented at it, even though it might be in disguise.
No, I think Earth is so important in sales. And I learned this the hard way because as a fire, I just, like my drive was to win. So it'd be like I would do a sales process here, and it would be completely different than a sales process here. And it would be completely different than a sales process here. And all of a sudden, I've got seven different products going out. Realistically, I only had one product, it was me speaking. But all of a sudden, it was like, I felt like I was selling all these different things, and it was because I was completely unstructured. Then when our company started to grow, we've got 14 people. There's no system. That led to me being the only salesperson for a decade because trying to teach somebody how I sold didn't work. And that's thank you behavioral elements for helping me understand I can't just take somebody, grab a hold of them and be like, go sell like Jay Johnson. You have to have a system in place. You have to have some repeatability, some reliability, and you have to have essentially a structure in place so that way you're not selling outside of scope. You're not selling something at a at one rate over here and a different rate over here, that you actually have some level of reliability within that process. So I think it's so important that we do have some structures in our sales. Is it important to be adaptable? Yeah, of course. Balance. That's what it's all about. So we kind of glossed over the fire elements. Um, let's dig into that for just a moment. I actually see I see Taylor's comment when I left bedside nursing before my first BE assessment. The lack of structure and routines, even with the chaos, rocked my world. And Earth being the lowest. That's not uncommon because and I'm glad you brought that up, Taylor, because we all have all four elements. Uncertainty, unreliability affects all of us. Doesn't matter how high your Earth is, doesn't matter how low it is. We as human beings don't necessarily like uncertainty. It just affects us differently. We may do different things. Terry, I know, uses his adaptability to overcome uncertainty. Me, I'm more of the fire, so I just drive through it, whatever the barrier is, just keep pushing and hitting my head against the wall until something useful comes out. I know Francesca is much better with the sort of balance in that space. So I think it's really important to remember whatever element that you are coming in as your primary or secondary, that doesn't define you. We can always lean into the other elements. It just may not be as comfortable to start off with. So the fire element, it shows up in sales. It shows up in, especially in that sort of direct sales. How can we, and let's take this to a, how can we create more balance? If I am a fire element, which I am, how can I create more balance by bringing in some of the other elements? If I'm not a fire element, how can I lean in to being able to make that direct ask? And that's really what the question is. Go ahead, Francesca.
One of the things that I loved, whether it was in real estate or when I was working as an executive at that company, is that if you kind of have, and I would say I didn't really maybe know I was doing this at the time because I didn't know the language model of BE, but if you do have multiple elements in a client meeting, or maybe they're kind of more on the balance end, they kind of relate to a couple different ones, you can kind of build your language like a sandwich. So you can kind of open up with some fire and air energy, bold, have some insights, but then you can kind of deepen in with the water and kind of build that trust in the middle, and then closing with an earth statement, something that really brings that reassurance, that clarity of like, here's why it's sustainable, here's why this is a good plan, something of that nature. Sometimes that can really help, just especially if you're in a board meeting with several different elements and you're wanting to make sure that it relates to everyone. That's a way that can be done as well. I don't know what you think, Terry or Jay, but just a thought I'd bring.
Go ahead, Terry.
I like that idea because ultimately we do speak and hear a different language, right? What resonates with one will not resonate with the other. So I often do my best to think of two or three different ways to say the same thing so it can have that maximum reach. Even if you're in a room of 12 people, it matters to actually allow people feel like they're connected to what you're saying. And if I say something to an earth, it's not going to connect to a fire if I use the same language, right? So I think that that adaptability, that understanding, and that acceptance that each of us process things differently in being able to meet folks where they are is when I first looked at behavioral elements, I was like, sure, this is a cool tool for understanding self. But the power and the magic in it is relating with others, right? To be able to instantly see who they are so I can talk to them in their language. I was like, bravo, bravo, bravo. Still am, still feel that way.
Love that, Terry. So, audience, we want to hear from you. What are your questions? What are your thoughts? Is there something that gets you stuck? Because let me share with you, and I think this is really important. And it affects all of us, but it affects us differently. I think a lot of times, and Cheryl, tell me if I land on this a little bit. Part of the water's reluctance towards sales is rejection, the concept of rejection, or putting somebody else out. And when we're thinking about that, if you were to shift that mindset and think like, all right, I'm making dinner for Terry, but Terry comes over, and as he comes over, he says, "Oh my gosh, I just had dinner at Francesca's, and Francesca made this huge lasagna, and I am so full. I'd love to have your dinner, Jay, but I'm stuffed. Am I going to be like, Terry, you're a terrible human being, and I hate you, and I don't like you anymore. Get out of my house? Probably not. There's going to be some reasonability to say, Terry's not really rejecting me. It's just that the dinner that I've created doesn't satisfy his appetite right now, or his appetite's already satisfied. He's already full. He doesn't need it. So maybe I bag it up for him and I offer it to him 2 days later or a day later as leftovers or whatever it is. Okay. Terrible analogy. But my point of the matter here is that rejection isn't a rejection of the individual. It's just that the product or whatever the service is doesn't necessarily fit the appetite in that moment. That doesn't mean that that person's not going to have an appetite later. That doesn't mean that we have to break the relationship. In fact, keeping the relationship and keeping it warm is a great way for us to be able to do that as we navigate forward. Go ahead, Francesca.
And I think too, for Jay, Terry, and myself, and even the audience, sometimes if we ask ourselves two different questions, one of them, what frustrates you the most about being sold to? If we can reflect on that, it pretty much gives us a roadmap of what not to do for especially your own element too. If you know that you're going to be selling to hi-fi or whatever, that's literally giving you a roadmap right there. And then asking yourself, what do I admire in a great salesperson? That right there is huge. And just start to reflect on that and maybe start to get curious. Ask people around you. You know that maybe Sarah's a high earth. Ask her, hey, what frustrates you the most of being sold to? And what do you admire in someone? Adapt some of those qualities, maybe some of the language that would really resonate with that type of person, and then model that after. I think that the more curious we are about the people around us, I think that the roadmap's right there. We're just choosing not to maybe have access to it, but I think that's really where the game changer can be.
I'd like to build on that for half a second because those are great questions that Francesca just suggested. One more that I'd add is how do I make buying decisions, right? What am I like as the purchaser? Because it's likely that other people are similar to you, especially if they're the same element. I know for me, I'm a think it over guy, right? It's like I'm gonna sit through this. I'm gonna do a little bit more research before I make the final decision. So when my prospects say I've got to think it over, I'm like, of course you do. How would you not think it over? Even if they told me exactly what they needed, I presented exactly what they needed at a price they already said they were gonna pay, I still allow them to think it over because that's who I am.
I am exactly the opposite. And fires out there, tell me if this resonates or land with you. Get to the point, tell me what this is going to do for me, and then I will make a decision literally right then and there. And it's going to be a very, very quick decision. Some people might call it impulsive, but I call it very well thought out and just, very gut instinct. But with that being said, generally, if I'm in a purchasing mentality, I've probably already put a reasonable amount of thought into what I want, what I don't want. So now it's just a question of, do you line up? No. Okay, next. Do you line up? No. Okay, next. And that's really like, that's
But I have a question for you, Jay, though. So, how do you balance that with someone's talking to you in the buyer persona, whatever that may be, client relationship? So, say if you're talking to a client, how do you balance that with maybe a water element that's not as high, but to be able to say, not just about getting your point across, but actually hearing what they have to say and then working with that? Because sometimes their no isn't necessarily a no to you or that they don't want to work with you. There's usually a barrier there that if we can kind of just have a bit of empathy, slow down for a second, and kind of work it through, there's usually a workaround. How do you typically balance that? I know you do a great job at it, so I think it'd be helpful for the audience.
when I'm selling or when I'm being sold to.
Yeah, when you're selling.
So when I'm selling, if I find myself in a position where maybe the product that I'm selling or the service that I'm selling doesn't necessarily fit, or I get some kind of, hey, now is not the time. Typically, I'm very comfortable with saying, what is it about this time that's not right for you? Is it a budget issue? Is it a calendar issue? Is it something that's resolvable? And I'll go right back into what Terry had said earlier is get right back into curiosity. So instead of it being like, oh, okay, thanks so much, and walking away from it, I want to understand. And interestingly enough, when people, and this is a very human function, when people tell somebody no, they are more likely to essentially do something to solve the relationship. So I say no to you, and then you ask me a question, well, can you help me understand X, Y, and Z? They're more likely to say yes because it's not costing them anything. They feel like it's repairing the relationship. Now I'm gathering information. If it's a calendar issue, I set a time on my calendar to reach back out. If it's a budget issue, I take a look and say, is there an opportunity for us to reduce the scope of this and do whatever else? So for me, it's really about being comfortable with not retreating when I get a no, and then demonstrating some kind of empathy or curiosity to get a better understanding of what is it that's creating the condition of no. If I find that the no is related to, hey, that product or service is not going to fit, I immediately start thinking, how can I solve their problem for them, even if it's not me? Oh, Taylor, you got to talk to Taylor. Taylor's going to be able to solve your problem. Could I make a connection for you? Or, I heard my friend Sarah has gone through this exact same situation. I'd love to create a connection. She might be able to help you navigate whatever that looks like. Because if I can solve their problem, even if it's not me getting the sale, just like you said, if I can solve their problem, they're going to think about me the next time they have a problem to solve. And that's really where I find the balance. So it's not a rejection for me. It's a, hey, not right now is perfectly okay. How can I transition that into making them feel great, solving whatever the challenge is right now? And that's going to lead to something in the long term. And I found that to be true over and over again.
And I think to what Jay just said too, it's like a combination. It's helping them solve their problem, and it can also sometimes be empowering them to solve their own problem. I think that if we can point them in the right direction and empower them to use the tools that they have, I think that's incredible too. So I love that, Jay. That's really awesome. How about you, Terry?
I think it's really important to just dial in, be of service, add value, and maybe my water's just gushing all over the place. But when I hear Jay talk about the idea that I just want to support, right? And I position myself for the next time around, right? It's there's a saying from a TV show I like, and the quote is always make a great first impression and leave a lasting one. And you can't make a more lasting impression than doing something good for people that you're not expecting anything from. And yeah, again, my water's flowing. Whee!
Yeah. So I want to kind of comment a little bit on some of the chat, and I'm going to bring this in. There's that aspect of, am I selling something that they don't want, they don't need, and kind of looking at that. I want to bring in just an important aspect of ethics in sales, ethics in persuasion. And here's really where I think about it. And I guarantee for any of you that are selling things, you're not selling arsenic, you're not selling nuclear waste. I know this. So I really want you to think about it this way. If the product, whatever it is, whether it's, and let's even take something like Cheryl, I'm going to use the example. You're selling candy bars. Well, you're not really selling candy bars. You're selling candy bars to raise funds for something that's really important or really valuable or really meaningful to you. So, the first thing that I like to tell people is be intimately familiar and love your product, whatever that product is. And if it's something that's helped you or you've seen it help other people, that's what you really want to focus on and get into your brain that I'm not selling somebody something that they don't need, that they don't want, or anything else like that. The product I have delivers a value proposition, whatever that value proposition is. Now, if you say, again, I'm selling dinner, Terry's already eaten, that value proposition is not there. But Francesca has not eaten. Now there's a value proposition that I have, a delicious dinner, and somebody who might need it. That's where the real power of sales is. But being intimately passionate about your product starts to make it where we're not necessarily feel like we're pushing something, it makes it feel more of like, I've experienced some greatness out of this, and I want you to experience it too. Or I've seen this really impact people in a positive way, and I want you to have that impact as well. And if we start to shift that mentality of, I'm not selling something, I'm creating the opportunity for somebody to really find, when it comes to sales, people buy things because they want to save time, they want to save energy, they want to save money, they want to save effort, they want status. If I can think of all of those different things that really help elevate somebody else's life with the product that I'm selling, that's where the sweet spot of sales ultimately comes in.
And I think too with what you're saying, Jay, I mean, even taking it one step further, okay, so I mean it's a funny analogy, but we'll go to it. So say if, Terry's already ate dinner and I haven't, fine, so be it. But maybe Terry didn't get any company or that connection when he was eating dinner with whoever he was eating dinner with. And maybe now you're not selling him the dinner, but you're like, awesome, so you're full and you're satisfied. That's fantastic. I also offer the ability to sit at my table, and I mean it's such a funny analogy, but to sit at my table and gain connection, to gain this, this, and this. There's so many different offshoots of how can I provide value from this for this person maybe on this next step of their journey. And I mean that's one of the things that a lot of you in the chat do well, that you and Terry do well, is you're multidimensional, right? It's not just here's the one thing that I offer. It's okay, how can I tailor this to you? And I think maybe that was one of the things that like I had did back at the counter that I didn't even realize I was doing back when I was 17 was there were times where someone was trying to get a specific sales thing to get this free gift or whatever, but they're like, I already have everything I need. I'm like, do you have any birthdays coming up? They're like, oh, well, my niece, her birthday's coming up. I'm like, awesome. Do you think we could pick out a couple things for her? Oh my gosh. Then all of a sudden it's now our conversation. Now they've already hit their $150 target. And now we're packaging it up. I'm like, I'll gift wrap it for your niece. How about if I help you write a little card? We're good to go. She's like, this was fantastic. We just never know who we can help serve in those moments, even if it's not maybe what the original ask was, right?
Yeah, no, it's very true. So I see Cheryl's comment in there. What I really like, those world famous chocolate bars were horrible. Maybe that's more of why I couldn't push. Here's how I would approach that in a sales. If I was selling to Francesca, I'd say, listen, you and I both know this is not the best chocolate in the world, but that's not really what I'm selling. What I'm selling is the dream for these kids to go to camp. And that's really what you're buying. So I recognize the chocolate, give it away to your neighbors, do whatever else, but would you be interested in supporting this cause?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not selling the chocolate. I'm selling the actual impact of what this is doing at that point in time. And somebody's going to look and say, thank you for being honest. You're right. This chocolate does suck, but I do want to support that cause I'm in, right? So that's where we can kind of shift some of those narratives.
Unless you're talking to a fire, they might not care about the cause so much, but you'd be like, I want my kid to win against all the other kids. Help my kid win. And we're
Yeah,
gonna
and
raise money for this great organization. The fire might be like, I'll give you $1,000 for this chocolate.
and I love that. Don't oversell. Don't say, "Hey, this is the best chocolate in the world. You need to buy it." That is not a good sales tactic because when they take that first bite and they realize like, ugh, you've immediately lost your reputation. You've lost that. And I think it's so important that we're selling honesty. And that's really where I go with that ethics. So, um,
This is why it's so important for you to start any sales conversation with questions so you can understand who you're talking to, because you can make that pivot in a moment. I think about, I do some work with nonprofits, and the people that support the nonprofits usually have an affinity for the nonprofit. If it's cancer, they've got a friend or a relative who has suffered from cancer. If it's an adopted dog place, they're a dog lover, right? We don't normally support nonprofits that we don't have some intrinsic tie to. It's the same thing with persuasion and influence. If we don't know how to align what their interests are with what we have to offer, we don't sell anything.
And I have one more thing I want to share with you guys. You might find this funny, but when I was an executive assistant for several years for this top agent for real estate, I'd go to these different sales appointments for listings or whatever, and I would ask these questions, and it drove Nicholas crazy because I had my book where every single client had like I'd ask them their dog's name, and Nicholas was like, "Oh my gosh, French." At first, especially at first, he was like, Francesca's just being thoughtful and she wants to get like I asked him about their dog, their kids. I'm like, do you have any grandkids? How often do they come to visit? And he's like, for Pete's sakes, we want to sell this house. Can we get to the listing price? But here's where that ended up coming in handy. This one lady ended up calling, something pissed her off. I don't know. The sign got delivered and she didn't like the placement of it or whatever. And she flipped her lid and called him. And I remember Nicholas looked at me and he's like, I don't know what to do with this person. Can you handle this? I'm like, no problem. I'm like, hi, let's say she was Sue. Hi, Sue. How's it going today? And I let her vent. She talked to me, no problem. And then pretty much I said, Sue, I said, I'm really sorry about the sign. I said, we can move it. That's not a problem. I said, by the way, I meant to ask you last week, how was so and so's soccer camp? Oh, it went really good. And then I started talking about, and you said that you mentioned that the dog was going in for that veterinary appointment. How did that go? Oh, okay, you know what? We'll bring some treats over next time we're there. And all of a sudden, by the time I got the call, I'm like, she's all good. We're just going to move the sign on Tuesday at 5. Nicholas is like, how'd you do that? I'm like, because I opened up the file and all these questions I had asked about her, it brought her back to what was really important to her. She didn't care about the sign. She was stressed about her dog. She was stressed about whatever it was in her personal life. And if we're able to connect it back to those, like what Terry says, yes, we want to be prepared for our presentations, but if we actually study the client more than we do who are we and how are we selling ourselves, you're good. Who does everyone want to talk about the most? Them. They don't want to hear about us, So
It's
yeah,
such
that's my little story I wanted to share.
No, it's such a great lesson. So, let's take our last 5 minutes here. And if I'm selling to an air, earth, fire, water, Terry, if I'm selling to an air, what do I need to think about?
You need to tell them ways that you're going to help them learn, help them grow, talk big ideas, make sure that you get them enrolled in a vision that is bigger than what they are currently experiencing. And they're all ears, man. They're like, yeah, let's go.
Love it. Francesca, if I'm selling to a water, what do I need to be thinking about?
So it's going to be trust first, intuitive. They're going to focus on harmony and connection, and specifically in purchasing. They're going to be basing their purchasing on loyalty, their history, maybe the team, the well-being, and especially brand relationship. It's not going to be about the product per se. They might really resonate with the CEO, what the brand represents. Maybe that they give back to sick dogs. You just whatever that may be, but that's going to be their main focus.
All right, we'll tackle earth together and I'll cover fire last. Thoughts on earth? If I'm selling to earth,
Clear contracts, guarantees, minimal risks,
yep,
steady.
certainty, reliability, data, and details.
Back to your earlier point about efficiency and productivity, those are a couple of the things we didn't talk about when we were saying this is what people buy things to save this, this, and this. They also buy to increase productivity and efficiency and make things faster and steady. But yeah, everything that Francesca said nailed it too.
Absolutely. Fire elements. For some, I would say there's a status element. So how is this going to help raise status, awareness, visibility? There's a competition aspect. How is this going to help them win, exceed results, move beyond the next level? And last but not least, don't get so caught up in the details, get caught up in the vision. Tell them what it's going to look like or what the world looks like when they purchase this product. And I think that that'll help you navigate selling to some of the different elements. All right, team, we are here at the end of our hour on our discussion of sales. Audience, we want to hear from you. What is your takeaway from today? Is there something that stood out to you, some way that you're going to elevate your sales as you walk forward? Toss it into the chat. What is something that kind of landed with you? Maybe a new insight, a different mindset. And we are all sales people in some way, shape, or form. Whether you're selling a bedtime of 9:30 over 10 o'clock, whether you are selling a product or service in your professional life, or alternatively, whether you are selling, whether you want to go to this place for dinner or that place for dinner, we all need some level of sales. And this is hopefully going to give you some insights on how to navigate that more effectively. So I see some of those coming in, the sandwich pitch. Yes, another great, awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. Reminding myself, high water, you can still sell. Absolutely, Caitlin. And actually, again, that customer lifetime value, you've got the advantage. You've actually got the natural built-in skills that some of us really had to develop over time and figure out. So you've got an advantage there. Sell as a water, buy as an earth. I love that, Sarah, that dichotomy. Awesome. These are some great takeaways, team. Yes, I love it, Cheryl. Bill, treat them the way they want to be treated. I love that, Bill. Awesome, Taylor. When not knowing the other. Yep, get those questions in there. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us in this month's Lunch and Learn with Terry, Francesca, and myself. Of course, if you need any additional assistance or support, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And if you haven't taken the assessment, jump in there, take the assessment at behavioralelements.com. We will look forward to seeing you next month when we tackle our next set of topics. Maybe it's something spooky given that it's October. So look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Francesca, and see you all next time.
Thank you, everyone. Great session today. And thank you, Terry, and thank you, Jay.
Good work, people. Love it. Enjoy the day. Happy selling, y'all.
Bye bye.
Happy selling.